with. We've got updated and centralized documentation, so a lot of that stuff has now become part of the core product documentation. And there's the usual general API improvement there. Interestingly though, they've added a bit of magic into the headless services to allow you to use legacy MVC components in your headless websites now. They're doing some clever trickery in the background to cache the HTML that they generate and make it available to the layout services for your JavaScript sites to consume. It's going to help us make more gradual migrations towards headless sites in the future. And then the last thing on my list for this is that the headless services are now compatible with something called Experience Edge. Now, currently, when we deploy a headless website with Sitecore, we still have to provision content delivery servers. They're needed to run the API services that your JavaScript front end uses to fetch layout and content. And since those services have to be exposed out to the internet, you have to be able to scale them, both in terms of raw compute power and in terms of geographic scale if you're dealing with websites that span the globe. And we've been used to having to manage all of that manually up until now. But Sitecore wants to make this simpler towards this kind of SaaS vision of the future. And Experience Edge is the first step here. It takes those headless API endpoints that you used to have to run, and it takes them up to the cloud to run in a kind of edge cache model, basically. So you publish content in the same way you traditionally would have from your Sitecore content management box, and this edge service will ingest the media and the items and the presentation data and automatically scale the services that provide it to work with your website. So you no longer have to worry about deploying servers here, you just pay in a kind of consumption pricing model. And I'm going to mention this service again in a bit because this will come back to us, but this is kind of a good point to switch over to talking about the vision for the future. Because Sitecore knows their market is changing. The era of the monolithic CMS is coming to an end, basically, and they know they need to have a more modular, composable, SaaS-focused product for the future. They have made a bit of noise about doing this with the Content Hub platform, but it's not going to work for bigger, more complicated websites. So this year's symposium has given us the first view of the product that Sitecore are producing in order to fill that gap. They want to give you all the power of traditional Sitecore, but they want to provide it via a SaaS framework. So Sitecore's Dave O'Flanagan presented this diagram in his product keynote at the symposium recently. And there's a collection of interesting boxes here, which quite a few of them may be new to us. But the goal overall here is to give us a framework for a fully fledged SaaS content management system. Your public website runs on a modern Jamstack-based framework and is served via CDN-style serverless hosting. The personalization in this world is based on technology that's come from Sitecore's Boxever acquisition, rather than the old XConnect model. And you do your deployments using GitOps techniques. And it's all wrapped up with a kind of management website that allows you to take control of the instances you have deployed and deal with the billing and so on. And fundamentally, it's giving you the power of Sitecore's WYSIWYG editing model and their digital asset management all wrapped up in this product. Now, they're not showing some of their other acquisitions, the Mooseend, Reflection, and Order Cloud products that they bought, but fundamentally, you can still integrate them into this model. And you are also free to integrate technology from other providers of composable services. This is not going to be a closed system. So let's take a quick look at what some of these different boxes mean. The most important one here is the one that they've labeled Experience Cloud, basically. It's the content source for your system. It takes the current Sitecore XM product and it wraps it up with some SaaS magic. So you can manage your instances and your deployments through a portal, and internally they've got some clever magic that deals with deploying through containers and ensuring that all the right databases and search index cores and things are all provisioned for you. It's worth noting that this bit of the product doesn't have any requirement to scale. This is just the bit that your editors are making use of. So it's a fairly small self-contained thing. Your back-end developers do their normal Sitecore development work. They build their schemas and their customizations around Sitecore's headless frameworks that we have already. And then they can push out their changes using basically to a source code repository that Sitecore will host. And each of those changes that you merge in will trigger a GitOps build and deploy process that is broadly based around building custom Docker containers and running them in Sitecore's infrastructure for you. And that containerization, I think, makes the upgrade story for this approach potentially quite easy for us. Non-breaking changes are potentially wholly automatic, and even in the trickier upgrades where something has changed, broadly you're making the changes in your source code repository to cope with the new version and pushing them, and it can magically deploy onto the new version and update your data for you. The second interesting thing that Sitecore have put on this diagram that we've not really seen before is the Symphony box. And that is, it's the editing UI, and it's built on top of what we have now with the Horizon editing product. And it's going to be bundled into this SaaS product. So it can talk to the content APIs in the Sitecore XM instance to manage your content and your presentation. And it can talk to the personalization and data APIs that come from the Boxever acquisition to display data about your personalization and analytics. So basically it's giving us a kind of modern take on the traditional XP experience editor model, but all running on quite a modern, future-looking stack. Your editors, importantly, get all the traditional kind of page composition power of Sitecore's editing experience, but they're building a Jamstack website. As a developer, you construct your UI components and they get deployed, which I'll come back to in a second. And because all of this is basically just done through GitOps magic, it's a very fast process to publish changes and get them to your editors so that they can update content and layout to match. So, as I alluded to, once you've built your website with your headless framework, you need some way of actually deploying all that stuff. And as I said before, Sitecore trying to move away from the world of content delivery servers and also Node.js servers in this headless model. So what does serve the website? Well, there's two things I think that are important here. The first, as I mentioned before, is Experience Edge, because that's providing these cloud scale content APIs for you. And then the second thing is that you need to have somewhere to host and run your front end, your Jamstack project. Now, Sitecore have decided that Next.js is the best technology for the moment for implementing your front ends. So it makes a lot of sense that they have decided to partner with Vercel in order to deliver this. Vercel built Next.js, I believe, and they also run a serverless deployment model for websites built on that. So similarly to what I said about customizations for Sitecore, you are deploying your changes with a GitOps model, and their systems know how to run the kind of compilation and caching processes that Next.js makes use of. So you get to take advantage of that framework's clever approach to having static site generation and server-side rendering and client-side rendering kind of all wrapped up in one code base. And you get to do it without having to ever worry about CD servers or Node.js servers. And it's all powered by your Experience Edge data. And in theory, this gets us very fast websites so we can target these Google Lighthouse scores that are important now. Now, all of this is kind of quite exciting from my perspective, but I am aware that there are still a fair amount of fuzzy stuff in this plan because we don't have all the detail. And to be honest, that's not really that surprising. What Dave was presenting in the slide of his that I had earlier is a new product. Sitecore have said that we will see the first versions of this in kind of spring 22. And at this point, there's kind of internal demos and proof of concepts and stuff going on. But fundamentally, they've got to turn this into a marketable product. And what we're a bit fuzzy on at the moment kind of starts off with the Content Hub box, I think. That we don't really know how much of the digital asset management we get. Is it all the features, a cut-down version? Are there storage size limits? Are there user number limits? We haven't been told. And similarly, it's not clear right now what the difference between Boxever's full customer data platform product and this box that they've called Sitecore Personalize is in the SaaS product. And we've only seen mock-ups and demos of the whole deployment process so far. But my suspicion is that the big thing that we don't really know about at the moment is going to be the pricing model. We've been told that all of this will be billed in a consumption model, but we don't really know where the price point lands at this point. I think there is a lot of potential here for this to be very good in pricing terms for people who have lots of servers, large sites, heavy load, that kind of stuff, because we are taking away these content delivery roles that we've been used to having to deploy. But history tells me that it's also quite likely that the price point might be a bit too high for some of the smaller clients that we may deal with. And it's noticeable that we don't really have much guidance on where the pricing model for your non-production instances is going to go at the moment. How does your kind of test and deployment model fit into the pricing of all of this? But hopefully we will find out a bit more over time. So, how can I sum all this up? Well, I'd say it's exciting times in Sitecore land. Steve Zukakis has set a direction for the company, and with this collection of acquisitions and new products and exciting new plans, I think there's more change going on than we've seen for some time. And it's exciting change. It potentially will alter quite a lot about how we work with their products in the medium term. But important thing to say is don't freak out over that change. Your current skills and good old XP and things like that are not disappearing anytime soon. And similarly, the old deployment models are not vanishing either. Sitecore would like you to move away from platform as a service and move towards containers if you can, but the current models for managed services are staying, and you'll still be able to do a bare metal deploy for some time to come if you really want to. And we'll probably see some more expansion to the existing products as well. SXA and headless technologies and all these composable services that they've bought are all still usable outside of the context of any future SaaS vision. But over time, I think we are going to see a fairly strong push towards the idea that this modern headless SaaS is the right way to go. Sitecore are telling us that they think Next.js is the best pattern here for the moment, but .NET Core and all the other JavaScript frameworks are still available to you. I have a suspicion that we will have to do a bit more of the heavy lifting for the deployment and the plumbing if we veer away from Next.js. But if you have requirements for that, it is still possible. And finally, and I think quite importantly, we're beginning to see where the roadmap is for how we migrate from legacy MVC products towards this SaaS vision for the future. Sitecore is saying that code that targets the XM version of the platform works on 10.2, is broadly based around headless services, and can run in their managed services environment, is going to transition fairly simply into the SaaS product when it appears. So as an MVC-focused developer for many, many years now, I feel like there's quite a lot of new stuff for me to learn here. But I'm excited by the opportunity to rip the wrapping paper off all this new tech and try to build some exciting new websites with it. What do you all think?
Thanks, Jeremy. That was brilliant. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? We'd love some questions. So do just put your hand up and I've got the microphone ready. Any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Dave, for your presentation. It's a magnificent one. So,
Sorry about the screen. Yeah.
yeah.
It will be on the internet to see in
I brought my
big
glasses.
print.
Yeah, it's all right. So, just you mentioned through the presentation that Content Hub cannot be that solution that takes. So, what was the arguments behind that?
Well, it's not that Content Hub can't be. It's that I think Content Hub is not best placed for that. They're only just getting around to the idea of modeling hierarchy in content in the Content Hub system, and Content Hub doesn't deal with presentation at all. You can use it as a content source for a Jamstack style website or an integration into other platforms, but something else fundamentally has to do all the work for UI. So yes, you could build your company website just off that the Content Hub content editing bit and your own tech, but I think you're missing out on the richness of the UI model that the future SaaS product will bring us.
Any more questions in the room? I'm just going to double check if there's any on our live stream. No? Brilliant. So we're going to take a really short break now before we introduce Jacqueline. But thank you again, Jeremy. That was fantastic and some great takeaways for what we might expect in the year to come and beyond.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back to everybody on the live stream. I'm delighted to now introduce Jacqueline Baxter from Sitecore. She is going to talk through becoming a Sitecore MVP. We've got a couple in the room, so there'll be some very handy tips for everyone else, I'm sure.
Thank you so much. Oh, yes, thank you. That's the sound I've missed from having to do this with my mouse in my flat. So welcome, everybody. For those of you I have not yet had the pleasure of meeting in person, my name is Jacqueline Baxter. I'm a senior digital strategist with Sitecore. I am based here in London, although as I'm sure you can tell from my accent, I was not born here. I was previously with Sitecore Americas, and they transferred me to London in the middle of the pandemic because that's how popular I am at work. So I'm really excited to be here today to talk about the Sitecore MVP program. It's something I believe in very passionately. It's something that I was a part of, first as a Sitecore strategy MVP when I was part of Hedgehog development, and then when I joined Sitecore and found out that you cannot be a Sitecore employee and a Sitecore MVP, which seems a little ridiculous, but fine. Then I joined the MVP support programs. I'm currently a member of SMAC, which is the Sitecore Strategy MVP Advisory Committee. Oh, yes, it is a little temperamental. That's fun. So becoming a Sitecore MVP, an amazing achievement, an incredible achievement, something that people strive for all throughout the year, something that people really want to know a little bit more about how they can actually become a Sitecore MVP, which is a very reasonable thing. The application has tripped up a lot of very good people. The process is not necessarily as clear as we would sometimes like it to be. And so that's one of the things that I wanted to do tonight. One of the things that my colleagues and I would like to bring some clarity to the process, make sure that we're explaining not only how you can become a Sitecore MVP, but what the steps are to start building that application. Traditionally, the application process runs from November 1st to November 30th. This year, the application process ran from November 15th to November 30th because, you see, we have realized that most people fill out the application in the last 5 days anyway. So there's really no point in having it open for a whole month when everybody's just going to log on the 25th, fill out their application, and send it in. But this, as all of you very smart people probably have noted, is December 1st. So it is the perfect time to start thinking about how you're going to build your Sitecore MVP application for the year to come. So the first thing that I want to make very clear has to do with nominations. Now this year, you didn't actually need a nomination. Everybody's going, oh, if I'd known I could just apply. See, this is why you should follow me on Twitter. I talk about literally nothing else. We're hopeful, very, very hopeful, that by removing the nomination, we will actually have removed a barrier to access, that will have increased diversity, that will have an increased level of high quality applications. If that doesn't happen and we get an increased level of poorer applications, then we might go back to the nomination process. That's not going to be decided probably until October of next year. If you do need to be nominated, you can be nominated by a current Sitecore MVP or by any Sitecore employee. Any Sitecore employee can nominate you. That's something that I think a lot of people don't know, or that enough people didn't know, that it doesn't have to be just an existing MVP. It can be a Sitecore employee. Please feel free to reach out to me, to one of my colleagues on SMAC, to a lot of people in this room. We'd be glad to talk you through it. And of course, if you don't need a nomination, it all goes much more smoothly. You can just log on and apply. Being a Sitecore MVP means contributing to the Sitecore community. Full stop. That's what the entire application is evaluated based on. So we're good, right? I can go? It's totally clear. Everybody completely understands. Just in case you want some more specifics, it does require things that are provable. So generally speaking, we're talking about a blend of online and offline activities. And a really quick disclaimer, nothing about what I'm going to say here is set in stone. There's a lot of circumstances under which these specific things might not apply. I'll talk about a few of them, but each application is evaluated on its own merits. I can tell you that for sure because I'm one of the people who evaluates the applications. So keep in mind these are sort of guidelines. If you've ever seen Pirates of the Caribbean, the first one, the good one, they're more like guidelines. We do tend to tell people that what we want is a blend of online and offline activities. As, again, one of the guidelines, you can think of that as being 3 or more blogs or pieces of written content and 2 or more presentations. Please, please, please show your work. Send us a link to the blog. Send us a link to the white paper. Put that in your application. The faster it is for us to validate that you actually did the thing that you said you did, the more likely it is that that will be counted toward your MVP. Customer case studies do count, especially if they're public. We love to see that. We do like to see thoughtful and thorough answers to the open-ended questions. The application is the same every year. They've asked the same open-ended questions every year that since I've applied, every year that I've evaluated them, they're always the same. There's never going to be a nasty surprise. But something better than, I'm the best. I'm sure you are, but that's not something I can necessarily evaluate, much as I would like to. Consider the rule of more than one on all of this. More than one blog, more than one presentation. Again, the combo of 3 is something to think about. And this is especially important for those who are going for Sitecore strategy MVP. This content needs to be Sitecore specific. I do love to see more general stuff. I write more general stuff, more general thought leadership stuff. There's a lot of topics related to customer trust, customer privacy. Love to see that, but this is a Sitecore award. And that means that the content we're evaluating you on needs to be Sitecore specific. If you want to include extra stuff, that never hurts. Plus, I always love to read it because I'm a big nerd. But keep in mind, Sitecore specifics are the way to go. There we go. So again, think about proof points, think about customer case studies, and the thoughtful, thorough answers. The number of times I have seen, I'm really great and I contribute to the Sitecore community, and that's the end of the answer to the question. It's like, I'm sure that's true, but it doesn't help me. Help me help you. Thoughtful, thorough answers. So, I'm going to dive a little bit more deeply into the content guidelines because I always get questions about this, so I thought I'd just blow this section out. Love that ringtone, by the way. So thinking about 3+ blogs a year, one of the things I like to suggest is creating a series to get more out of a topic that you're passionate about. Those of you who work in content, those of you who work in digital strategy probably know very intimately, people don't read long articles, much as I wish that they did. Much as I wish that everybody would read the 3,000 word piece, that's the combo I want, that I wrote about digital trust and privacy. Nobody does. They read about the first 500 words if you're lucky, and maybe they skip to the end. So if you have a 4,000-word treatise on a really excellent topic that you're really passionate about, chunk that out, break that out into smaller pieces, put out a blog series. You can definitely leverage your company blog. That is fantastic. Please do make sure that you are credited. We have seen applicants send in, oh, I wrote this. We go to the company blog and it just says written by company. That doesn't help me either. I have to know that you're the one who wrote it. That's the only way for me to evaluate it. And please do feel free to submit blogs. SMAC has a newsletter and an email that I'm going to put up at the end for shameless self-promotion. We love to push out those topics. We love to create greater visibility. We're always willing to help out, to signal boost, using hashtags, especially if you're posting on Twitter or LinkedIn, always helpful. So presentations, again, 2+ a year. This really should go without saying, but if you didn't actually present it, it doesn't count. I do see a lot of people saying, I submitted for Symposium, which is excellent. Please don't stop doing that. But if you weren't accepted for Symposium and you didn't actually present on the topic, it doesn't count as a presentation. So keep in mind, anything that you submit to Symposium or to a subcon that isn't accepted, and that happens a lot, they get a lot of presentations, a lot of submissions, can be repurposed for a user group like this one. If you present virtually, a lot of user groups have gone virtual. I don't expect that to change anytime soon. Anything like that would count, but you do actually have to deliver the presentation in order for the presentation to count. And again, repurposing that content is golden. I see a lot of presenters, a lot of existing MVPs who will put together one presentation and they'll just sort of tour it around to all of the user groups. That's awesome. And that does count as separate presentations. Those presentations do tend to evolve over time. There's no reason why that wouldn't count. There we go. So this one is a sticking point. This is the thing. If I had to pick the one thing that people email me about the most after every MVP season, it would be this. Customer and internal presentations cannot necessarily count. And the reason is it's really hard for us to evaluate those things. It does say here on the strategy MVP category, which is especially true, but that does go for technical and for ambassador as well. Because they almost always take place behind a closed door and often under some form of NDA, we can't evaluate it, and it doesn't contribute to community knowledge. And again, that's the goal of the Sitecore MVP Award, is to reward communication within the community. If you are able to record that presentation and put it up on YouTube, if you're able to turn it into a blog, if you're able to take it out to a user group, then it would count. I do understand that a lot of us, all of us in fact, put a lot of effort into our jobs. We put a lot of effort into making sure that our clients see success with their platforms, and that is amazing. That is also why you get a paycheck. So in order to get an award, you have to go a little bit further, just that one step further. And we don't say that to be mean. We say that because it's really the only way for us to evaluate that the content is pertinent, that the content contributed to community development, if that makes sense. This answer is a little bit different for ambassadors, and the ambassador category is much more based around evangelism and being a brand ambassador for Sitecore. So when it comes to the ambassador category, this answer can get a little fuzzier, but if you're going for a technical MVP or a strategy MVP, this one's pretty firm. Social sharing. We love social sharing. We love to see it. I especially love to see it. Tweeting is great. Please do add context. Don't just retweet. We see that a lot. We see, oh, I signal boosted, which is fantastic, but it doesn't tell me what you think about the topic. It doesn't show me that you're contributing and participating. LinkedIn, again, same thing. Sharing is great, but add a little bit of context to the post that you're sharing. Snag a few of those URLs. If you have a Twitter thread that you really got in depth with some people in the community, snag that URL, throw it in a Word document, throw it in Pages, throw it in something so that you can find it easily when it comes to be time to format your application. That way you just grab the URL, throw it in there, problem solved. Please update your GitHub or don't use it. There are so many applications where it's like, here's my GitHub, and it hasn't been updated since 2015. It's like, I could have a GitHub that hasn't been updated since 2015. You're being evaluated on the content and the activity of the past year. So if you haven't had an update since 2015, you don't need to put your GitHub on there. If you have, great, that's what we like to see. But it doesn't actually help you to have a GitHub on there where there is no update. And with Slack, I hope everyone is a member of the community Slack. If you're not a member of the community Slack, we'd love to have you. Please reach out to us so we can figure out a way to get you in. Please make sure that you are participating and not just lurking. With Slack especially, the only way we have to evaluate that is by actually going in and seeing how often we can find you in the thread. It's not the best system, I'll admit, but if you haven't participated at all and we can't find you, we're much more likely to say, well, then I can't say for sure that this is true. And make sure that you're tagging people. Hashtag SMAC, hashtag Sitecore MVP is always a popular one, so that we can search that out pretty quickly. Again, active and consistent participation. And the GitHub one really can't be overstated. It's sad. It makes me sad. So, tips and tricks. Things to do. Do reach out to the Sitecore user groups. They're virtual now. So many more of them are virtual. Many of them are scheduling presenters months and months in advance. So you can get yourself a presentation schedule set up pretty far into the future. Start tracking your activity now. The application doesn't change significantly. Again, it especially doesn't change in what it asks for in your online and offline activities. So start keeping track of that now. Just throw it in a Word doc on your desktop. You do need both online and offline activity. Again, that's not a super hard and fast rule. Somebody who's written 13 blogs, 2 white papers, and an ebook is probably not going to be dinged because they didn't have an opportunity to present once. If one category far outweighs the other, you're probably still okay. But for most people, a blend of online and offline activity is going to be what you're looking for. Please make sure that you're getting recommendations if we do need nominations from Sitecore MVPs and Sitecore employees. That always helps to have a blend of those recommendations. And do feel free to ask for help. Again, I'm going to put up the SMAC email. I reviewed several applications this season, just people sending them to me, asking what we thought. My colleagues did the same. I know various people in this room have mentored other Sitecore MVPs, have reviewed their applications for them. We're always happy to help. I can't say the same for necessarily everyone in the community because the world is wide and I cannot speak for everyone, but most people that you reach out to are going to be very happy to take a look at your application. And do try and space content out throughout the year. Only I call it, oh no, October, but we do see it. We do notice when it hits October and all of a sudden everybody's just like, boom, here's a bunch of blogs. It's like, gosh, is there something coming up that you want all those blogs to be public for? Something coming? It's not necessarily going to prevent you from getting the MVP because you did produce the content, but it does make those of us who are evaluating go, okay, but there are like 11 other months in the year. Here we go. We're going to talk about what not to do. Yay, the don'ts. Please don't phone it in. This happens every year, and every year it's so depressing. Every year there's at least a couple people who just, you know what it is? It's like when you went to university and you wrote a paper at like 2 a.m. that was due at 6 a.m. the next morning, and you turned it in knowing that it wasn't necessarily your best work, but hoping that nobody would notice. It's like that, except worse because all of us notice, I promise. Please don't do that. Make sure that you give yourself at least a couple of days head start. If you're working on your application throughout the year, this is going to be much easier for you because you're going to be able to just copy paste a lot of the answers in. Don't list everything from past years. This happens especially when content creation and participation in the community is very light from the year before. If you start going back to like 2018, 2017, if that's what you need to make your application robust enough that you feel like it will be considered, it's time to look at your life and your choices and think about doing just a little bit better for next year. I don't mean to be harsh, but seriously, I love that you presented at Symposium in 2017. That isn't going to count for your 2022 or 2023 Sitecore MVP application. This one is very specific, fortunately, because it doesn't happen very often. But if you are an existing MVP or you get the MVP award and it comes with a warning, please don't ignore the warning. We issue the warning to help you. We want you to succeed. We really do. None of us like saying no. We want everybody who applies to become a Sitecore MVP. We want it to be so easy to just blow through the applications and go yes to everybody. Problem solved. If you have gotten a warning, it's because something about your application almost wasn't good enough. It's because we gave you a little bit of grace on something, and we want you to know that that grace was given and that it will not necessarily be extended again. Please don't ignore the warnings. We give them because we want to help you. Do not use work from home as an excuse. It was barely an excuse in 2020, but we tried to be understanding. It is not a valid excuse in 2021, not with how virtual everything's been. Believe me, I am more ready than almost anyone in the world to be done with this pandemic. If I could end it through the sheer force of my will, I would. Because we can't do that, the world has adapted. There are options for you. It will not be considered an excuse for this current application season that is just closed, and it will not be considered an excuse for the next application season. So just don't say it. Just don't do it. And then don't provide blog links with no titles or author credits or dates. The dates is a big one because corporate blogs sometimes will scrape the date off in order to make the content more evergreen. That's problematic because, again, we do need to know that it was created in this year. And as much as we love and trust you, we do need to have an actual source. Show your work. All right, so now we've got a couple of common questions. So what does evangelism really mean? That's a good one. And we've spent a lot of time this year, especially as a community organization within Sitecore, figuring that out. And essentially what we think is that it means being an advocate for the product publicly and not just within your company or to your customers. It means taking part in external marketing events. It means writing and delivering thought leadership that promotes the value of Sitecore, not always just the technical of how to do it, but specifically the value and the reason why you want to do it that way. Essentially, we think that evangelists are teaching others their path. They're teaching others what worked for them and why. The difference between a strategy MVP and an ambassador MVP, and I will be the very first one to admit that this one's been very fuzzy for a while. We hope that we're clearing it up for this year, but it does have to do with community involvement. Generally speaking, an ambassador MVP has a lower content and community participation threshold because it does fundamentally rely on the person being a brand ambassador for Sitecore. A strategy MVP is much more likely to be contributing content similarly to a technology MVP, although obviously in the strategy and marketing field. Customer presentations. So this goes back to my previous slide about how they almost never count, and that's because they're impossible for us to evaluate. It's not because we don't like them, it's not because we don't think you did a great job with them, but it needs to be public in order for it to be contributing to the development of the community. What about Sitecore lunches? We love them, love to see them. Everyone should go to one, they're super fun, we enjoy them. If you present at a Sitecore lunch, then that would count as a presentation. If you're going and participating, even if you're participating consistently, maybe not as much. It's a good thing to put on your application. It's definitely a good thing to do. You'll learn a lot. It's not necessarily enough to get you to an MVP all by itself. So as a supplementary activity, I can get behind it, and I would definitely encourage it. As a solo activity, probably not quite enough. Oh, conferences. Remember conferences and planes and human interaction? Conferences are amazing. We love to see them. We can't wait to see you there. If you're presenting, fantastic. That would count in part of the presentation column. If you're there and staffing the booth, that is awesome. You also got a sweet trip out of it, and it's part of your job. So again, we love to see it, but you need to present in order for it to be considered something that we can evaluate separately. And then what is a good balance of activity? I think I've elaborated on that quite a bit, but just sort of keep the rule of more than one in mind. 3 or more blogs a year, 2 or more presentations, or at least more than one of each in order to get yourself into the running. And as I promised, shameless self-promotion because no presentation is complete without it. We've got the strategy MVP email. That goes to not just me, although I am charming. It goes to all of us who are part of SMAC. So someone will get back to you. It might be me, it might be one of my colleagues in APJ or in AMS, probably depending on where you are located. We're always happy to help. We're happy to brainstorm. We're happy to run through things, happy to talk through things. Again, we love to see people succeed. I personally would love to see the strategy MVP category double in the next 2 years. Last year we had, I believe, 36. I'm hoping this year we'll get to 50. If we could break 50, that would just make my day. And if next year we could get to 70 or 80, that would be absolutely incredible. We want to see people succeed. If you're interested in this, I'm always happy to chat. I've realized now I did not do a very good job of shameless self-promotion because I didn't put any of my contact information on this slide. But you can reach me through the SMAC email, or Jeremy or Kate or several people in this room have my contact information. Again, I'm all over Twitter, I'm all over Slack. I'm hard to miss if you're looking for me. Thank you all so much. Happy to take questions, yeah?
That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. I hope everyone's feeling really inspired or really in the room. Yeah?
Oh, I was hoping my presentation was so amazing that there were no questions.
Well, no, I'm going to ask about the elephant in the room there.
Yep.
What are we doing about people who are coming from our acquisitions over the last year or so? The people who've been doing Order Cloud or Boxever or stuff like that?
That's a great question. Generally speaking, I think that the distinction will come in how they've been working with those tools. If they've been working with them from a technical perspective, then that would probably be counted as a technical MVP. What does happen, and this is a good thing for everyone to sort of keep in mind, if you submit to one category and we read through your application and we think that it's actually better suited to another category, which has happened, we'll send you an email or you'll get a message saying, we think this is in the wrong category. Would you like to submit in the ambassador category? Would you like to submit in the strategy category? And then it's up to the person in question to decide. I personally would love, and I'm very much hoping to see a lot more content strategists in the strategy MVP category this year. We had a few last cycle. I'm hoping we'll have even more. Anybody who's working with CDP, I think, again, you'd probably be walking a pretty fine line between strategy and technology, but all of that is going to be considered. All of that is considered now a Sitecore product. So even if you were working with a general CDP, throw Sitecore CDP in your blog. Just put the words in there. Problem solved, she said quietly.
Amazing. We have just got a question on our live stream from Steve McGill. Steve has asked...
Hi, Steve.
Would organising conference events such as Sitecore User Group, Convention EU, or smaller local events contribute to an MVP application?
Absolutely it does. I still encourage actually presenting at those events whenever you can, but absolutely we do have a lot of people in the community who spend a lot of time organizing those events. That absolutely does count. And again, that does go back to what I was saying earlier, which is there aren't really any hard and fast rules here. There's a lot of activities, a lot of things that you could do, a lot of activities you could participate in that would count toward a Sitecore MVP. This is not meant to be an exhaustive list, more to give a shape to the idea of what you need to be considered for a Sitecore MVP. But yes, Steve, it counts.
Fantastic. Any more questions in the room? No. And just a reminder that if you're going to apply next year, you'll be able to replay all of Jacqueline's very helpful tips and recommendations. So that's going to do your homework for you. We're going to take a really short break now before our next speaker. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Welcome back, everybody, and welcome back to everybody on the live stream. Delighted to introduce our final guest speaker today. We have Mark Lowe, Sitecore Architect from Key Coders. Mark, unfortunately, couldn't join us today due to the pandemic, so he's being live streamed from Switzerland. Welcome to you, Mark, and I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you, Hannah. I hope you can hear me good enough. Okay, yeah, so let's start. Let's show my first slide. I'm going to talk about Content Hub today, and I'm going to talk about some advanced techniques of integrating Content Hub with this Sitecore CMS. Just short intro about me. I'm a freelance Sitecore consultant, architect. I've actually spent quite a bit of time in London. I joined a few London user groups, and I would have loved to be back. I hope it'll work next year. I've been blessed with 6 MVP awards so far. Hearing Jacqueline's presentation from before makes me feel even more blessed. And yeah, I'm based in Switzerland, where I'm right now. Okay, so the agenda for this talk is going to be, first, let's have a look at the connector, just the basics. I'm sure most of you have at least seen how this connector works. So I'm just going to brush up the basics. And then we're going to look at tracking asset usage in the CMS and why that's important. And then we're going to write additional metadata into fields. And in the end, some architecture little considerations. And I'm going to try a short live demo. Let's pray to the demo gods that it works. So let's have a look at the connector. So if you are on Content Hub version 4 or higher, Sitecore recommends you to use this Sitecore Connect for Content Hub connector. There is an older version around that's just for the DAM part, but this connector includes 2 main parts. One is still a Sitecore Connect for Content Hub DAM, which allows you to browse and insert image assets into fields. I have a short video of how that looks. So you have on an image field, you can click an extra button, select a rendition, or select a public link, or create a new public link. Yeah, it was a bit quick. We'll see that again afterwards. A second use case we have for this DAM connector is we can insert images into rich text. There's a button there. Also, you can pick one of these images. This example, I've chosen to create a custom public link with a crop. Takes a few seconds to create the public link because it gets transferred to the CDN. And it's going to be done now. And well, you can select and insert into any rich text field. Okay. So we just briefly saw it before. There's an asset chooser interface that pops up whenever you click the button. This interface can be customized. This is just another page within Content Hub, and you have all the nice customization features of the search widget, and you can even create tabs and quite a few things. So this is just this screenshot is just an example of a customer site, customer implementation where we did quite a bit of customization on this. So this is, yeah, pretty straightforward to do this. You don't need any code. You could actually even insert custom code into here if you wanted to. So the second portion of this connector, I'm just going to keep it with the basics here is the CMP bit. And here you can sync content entities from Content Hub into Sitecore items. You can set up mappings between templates and fields and Content Hub entities and fields. And you can sync them, and it nicely synchronizes them into buckets in your Sitecore tree for you to then do things with it. Okay. So this leads me to our first customization that we could do, is how can we track asset usage? First thing we need to understand is how Sitecore stores these assets within the CMS. There are no items. So anyone who's been around long enough to know the media library, every asset has one item, is basically attached to an item. So a media, like an image field, has a link to this item. And we can track usage through the link database. This is not the case with references to Sitecore DEM. All that is actually stored within the raw value of an image field is an XML snippet like this one. So we have the Stylabs content ID. This is the asset ID from Content Hub. With a thumbnail link, we have the actual public link that we are going to use, and just some basic metadata like an alt text. I believe this is mapped to the title field, and a height and a width. So that's all that we have from the connector. So how can we keep track of these references? We don't have link database. How can I know which of my items reference a specific DEM asset? So what we can do is we can store these assets in an index field. I'm sorry, this is a bit code heavy. I hope you can read it on the screen. So basically what this code snippet does, we hook a computed field into the Sitecore master index, and this computed field iterates through every field, and if it's field type image, it's going to read the XML attribute Stylabs content ID, and it's going to add it to a list. So I mean, an item can have multiple image fields, so we're going to ideally have a list of assets that this item is referencing. Once we have it nicely stored in an index, we can do queries on it. This is just a basic query on the Sitecore master index, where we can say, yeah, this Content Hub asset IDs contains the ID that I'm searching for, and it should just return all Sitecore items that have a reference. So I actually created a blog post a couple of days ago on this topic. The link is on this slide. I hope the slides will be shared afterwards, and otherwise I have the link to my blog on the last slide, where this is like laid out in a bit more detail. So we have a cool use case we did for the client I'm currently working for. Let's say we want to show asset usage within Content Hub, like on an asset details page. Show me which Sitecore items are actually currently using this asset. Can do this. Let's show a short clip. So this is an asset details page. Let's scroll down and show my usage. And here we go. We have all items that have this asset reference. I can even click on it and it jumps straight away onto my Sitecore content management, onto my item that has the reference. That's pretty nice for authors, because otherwise keeping track of these assets would be, yeah, pretty tedious. So how does this work? It's a bit on the creative side, and the way we implemented this widget. It is a widget, an external component, how it's called on Content Hub. And this external component built in JavaScript calls the Sitecore CM and says, yeah, give me all references for asset 31002. And the Sitecore CM then asks its index that we have configured and returns some data on these references. We can then nicely create an output in the user interface and have some nice links created back to these actual assets, these actual items. For those of you who would like to see this in more detail, I also have a blog post on this topic linked above. Just exactly laid out how you can implement this widget. It doesn't have to exactly look like this, but this will be an idea. So now let's talk about metadata. We have a lot of data joined to any asset on Content Hub. That's what it does really good. So and we can customize it. So I have, for instance, created a customized field with some custom data in it. It can be anything. I would now like to use this data in my CMS. I would like to display it on the actual website. So how can I do this? Because in the basic implementation of this DEM connector just transfers the title and nothing else. So how can I get my custom field into my CMS world? Wouldn't it be great if we have something like this? We have this XML structure extended with more useful information like the file size, extension, custom fields, maybe the rendition. And wouldn't it be nice to actually have it displayed right in the image field? Well, this can be done. Let's show a video first, how this looks. Yeah, here we have custom metadata. Let's write something. And then go and pick that asset through the asset chooser. There we go. Let's save, and then we have this additional data. Yeah. Okay, let's change it just to prove that it's not fake. Can now hit refresh, and there we go. It fetches the new metadata directly from Content Hub. So how is this done? How does it work? We need to extend the image field control, and actually extending the image control. Image control is already an extended image field that manages this this button and all the Sitecore Content Hub features with this image field, and we can nicely hook into this and add some additional code, because what we need to do is the moment an asset is picked and transferred to this image field, we need to do another call to Content Hub through its API and fetch the additional information. Unfortunately, there's no way of fetching it right through this first connection. We had a look into that, decompiled some sources, but this would probably need to be done on Content Hub side of this connector. So the only thing left for us to do is go ask again for this additional data. Works very well. Okay, so this is upon choosing an asset, but what happens if someone changes this metadata and no one thinks of updating the CMS? What we can do is we can set up a save trigger and an action, and this will write save messages into an Azure queue. It basically writes asset ID with this number has changed. It actually even includes a change set, which field has changed, which field values. All we actually need for this implementation is the actual ID of what has changed. What we then did, we set up a scheduled job that fetches the last 50 or so entries every couple of minutes and then processes them and checks the index. Do we actually have any references to this ID? And if yes, go and fetch the most current metadata and then update all the items that are in the index. Yeah, that's how this works. There are other ways of doing this out there. Next slide has a link to a different approach, slightly different approach, where the Sitecore CM is directly connected to the Azure queue through Rebus. This is also a fascinating way of hooking everything up. We didn't do it this way because we were a bit concerned about mass changes on Content Hub, potentially bringing down the CM instance. If an author changes 20,000 assets or an asset that is used in many items, we are basically creating a lot of save and publish operations. That's why we like to have it a bit more on the lazy side with a scheduled job. But I guess that's up to you, up to the situation and the user requirements. So here is this post by Anna Brühlmann. She also has a fantastic blog with many Content Hub related tips. Okay. So we already have one foot in architecture considerations. One more, I want to show a thing we did with my last client. How we can decouple Content Hub code, Content Hub related code from the CMS solution. In the example before, upon picking an asset through the asset chooser, Sitecore CM creates an mClient session. mClient is the Stylabs Sitecore Content Hub SDK, and it opens a connection and fetches the metadata and updates the items. If you just need one additional field or something like that, that's fine. It's probably the best way to do it. But what if you have a lot of business logic related to these Content Hub assets, like we did it this way in the last project. I'll show an example afterwards. We created a facade, that's how we call it, the facade service, which is a .NET Core service that lives on its own, basically, has nothing to do with the Sitecore CM, and all it does is create a connection to Content Hub through mClient and fetch data if we ask it to do so. So we have all Content Hub logic around connective, like the user for and endpoint information. We have business logic around public links and much more in this facade. We have the client I'm working for has a quite extensive requirements towards Content Hub, with also creating public links on specific events and much more. That's why we decided to just move all this business logic into this facade service and just have Sitecore do basic HTTP calls. We just get back a nice JSON object with all data that we need. Sitecore CM doesn't have to manage, doesn't have to deal with Content Hub specific implementation. So yeah, pros, it's all separated, easy to build and test because, hey, it's .NET Core. We have cons is we need a separate deployment, but yeah, because it's .NET Core, it can be easily containerized, so deployment is not that big of an issue. Okay, I have a few minutes left, so I'll try to do a live demo, and let's see if this works. No, that was just my backup video. Let's have a look if we get this to work. I hope you can see my screen more or less. I'll zoom in a little bit more, but it might be a bit hard to read, but I hope you can still get the basic idea. So this code solution here, this is a Content Hub facade service. Just a very basic version I did for this demo. It has one controller with one action assets. I'm going to show afterwards. So what it does, it fetches the asset from Content Hub. It fetches file information like this main file property and decodes the information on here like content type, extension, file type. We have pages for PDFs. That's quite handy. And here we have this my custom field property that I created for this demo. And it's also going to read this. And we also have quite a bit more around public links, which I'm not going to go into detail here. I'll share all of this code to a GitHub repo right after this presentation. Okay, so let's start this facade service. Hope it works. I'm going to align it on the right-hand side, zoom in a little. Here we go. And let's open the browser. That's not what I wanted. This one I wanted. So my session is certainly ended. Let's start with this sandbox instance. Great, I'm still logged in. Just going to show you that this is a real demo and not a video. I already wrote hello London here. Let's say it might be a little early, but hey, there's a Christmas tree. Okay, I updated this data. Let's go to localhost, call my API, and this is asset 31002. So let's just call it. You can see something's getting fired up here. Yeah, it got through. So we have nicely curated metadata here. For those of you who know the Content Hub API, it's just going to return tons of information around this asset, basically everything, but you might just need the extension or the file size. You don't need relations to states or any other things. So that's the beauty of this facade service. It just returns what you need in your application. So we have this custom field. It returns the most current data. Let's go to the CMS. Secret password there. Dive into content editor. Let's clear this, save, and have a look. I'm going to go and grab this asset again. Select the original. And you can see something flickered up here. Let's save. And we can see here, oh, nice. It went and fetched this data. And we can see the actual call here on the facade. It got triggered. So we have the file size extension and we have my metadata that I need. And now if I need any other field, I can just go into my facade service and add this to my metadata array. Can also hit refresh and it's going to go back to Content Hub, ask for updates. It's quite fun. Okay, so now I want to show you one last thing. Let's have a look at the raw value. Try to zoom in a bit more. You can also see here we have the raw value, this content ID. Zooming right to the back. Here we have it. Custom metadata, Hello London, Merry Xmas. We have it right here in our field. Okay. Let's get back to my presentation. This actually already concludes my presentation. Demo code I will upload to the URL provided here. I'll do it right after the talk. And if there are any questions, I'm told they'll be relayed to me. So if anyone has questions, I can't hear you. But you can ask them and no questions. Okay.
Thank you so much, Mark. Yep, so if anyone's got any questions, we'll be typing them over to Mark. So just give him a few moments. Any questions in the room at the moment? And have we got any questions on the live stream? Okay, great. And for those at the back of the room, you can go onto the YouTube channel so that you can see all of the detail that you perhaps couldn't see up on the screen. So please do so. Lastly, I want to introduce Andy Ferries, who is Managing Director of Technology at UNRVLD. He's just going to give some closing remarks and speak a little bit about the work that we do.
No, seriously, the round of applause should be for this man. Presenting over live stream is difficult, but it is the age that we live in. Thank you to all the speakers tonight. Can we get a big round of applause for all of them? Incredibly informative, incredibly well presented, and incredible for people like me to make me sound like I know what I'm on about. So thank you very much to everyone who participated. I think, like Jeremy alluded to in his talk, we are moving into a very different era of a digital experience platform, away from the monolithic and to the new era of digital experience platforms. And I think it's a really exciting time. I've been around Sitecore for about 9 years now, working at UNRVLD, and I think the community and what you guys bring together to actually grow the platform, to grow the community, and to help each other is something that's really fantastic. And it shows that when you guys come together to actually help each other out, what we can achieve. So I think as we move into that new era, it's really important. So great to see you all here tonight. Thank you for those that have joined in person. I'm not going to speak for too long because I know you all want to get into the food and the beer. So I promise I won't keep you for too long. But thank you. If you want to know any about the projects that we're working with on UNRVLD or the opportunities we've got, please speak to any of the guys that are here. But other than that, enjoy the rest of your nights. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much to the presenters again. Thank you.
And if you are in the room, please don't forget to grab a little present on